I think a big thing, like maybe part of the big equation is getting to the point where you ask yourself, what is worth trading my time for?
Yeah.
Sure.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. Like what am I gonna give over 9 months or 2 years or 3 years for, and is it worth it?
Yeah.
Because I look back at the ones I didn't like and I was like, that was not worth, that was not worth age 28.
Yes.
Right.
Damn it. Well played, Hollywood. Well played.
Hi, and welcome to the Hollywood Reporter Roundtables. I'm your host, Lacey Rose, and I'm so excited to have you guys all here. If someone, a fan, is to approach you guys on the street, what are they likely to recognize you from, and like, what do you typically get?
Well, I usually get like, yo, I'm a huge fan of your music. And I'm like, I'm not DJ Khaled. It's just very rude. I'm upset. For me, it's definitely, for my stand-up, and particularly Mo, the series, it's something that's, as far as representation is involved and how authentic it is and grounded it is, people are very like excited about it, enthusiastic, and it's like you see the energy from them usually. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what's, it was Glenn for a long time, obviously.
And what would they say?
Oh, I stopped watching when you died, which I don't believe them. I finished all the seasons. But now what's just cool is after Beef came out, they're just kind of like, are you the guy in Beef? And that's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
Because I'm never on anything consistently. Like yesterday, someone said, I loved your latest thing. And I like that, yeah. Because they feel like albums or something, you know.
At Chris for a long time. Yeah. Will continue to do so. Yeah. Usually when people, it takes them a long time to figure it out because I think there was such a like age difference in change. So usually it's just something that's hollered from me 15 feet behind me as they figure it out. And then like I'll turn around and say what's up, and then they'll question whether or not that's actually it or not. People are still, from The Walking Dead, people are still really upset with how that went. They're really upset, really upset.
That was another
very, very, it's like they're happy to see, and then they're like, they did you wrong. And I was like, no, it was scripted, it's okay. We all agreed, it was fine. They didn't do anything to me. But with Abbott, I think now is the first time I'm getting Mr. in front of anything. I'm getting Mr. Eddie. Yeah, so I'm an adult, y'all.
You made it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine this?
Mr. Period. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I get Muppets a lot. Like the kids who were 10 when they saw Muppets are in their 20s now, which that's freaky experience. And Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Usually those two things.
And what do they say?
It's usually an odd dynamic because the kids have seen the Muppets and the parents have seen me naked.
Yep. So that's a real balance.
Muppets in that one too.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Tyler, you've said that you sort of couldn't be happier that Abbott happened now and not sort of 5 or 10 years ago. In what ways do you feel like you were sort of ready for it now and perhaps wouldn't have been then?
I feel like anybody who starts like really young, and like Jason may be able to speak to this as well, is so much of it is out of your control, right? That stuff is just kind of coming at you and you're trying to field it as it's happening. So with Abbott, what I loved with this period of time is that I knew what I was doing. It wasn't as much the creative of it all. It was handling the success, I guess, the press and all of that. I felt much more grounded and knew like how to set boundaries and when to like tap out, and knew what I wanted to say and the type of actor I wanted to be. I think before, as a kid, you're just trying to make people happy. You just kind of want to do a good job. So it was good to be able to get another run at that now.
You sound like you're nodding and suggesting that you
Yeah,
can
no,
relate
I
to
relate.
that.
I think that at the beginning, you're so just trying to make it. You're just so trying to get somewhere that your throttle, you have the pedal to the metal.
Yep.
Creatively and with your hustle and with your grind. The struggle I had was figuring out how to adjust that so it became sustainable. So you were making actual choices, like you said, like at the beginning, you're just trying to work and be seen.
Yeah.
And then at some point I had to like make the conscious realization, like you're okay. You can take a couple months off. You can think about what you want to do next.
That's a huge
It's a
part.
huge
Yeah.
thing, you know?
No, it's absolutely crucial. I think that's something I was taught early on. My stand-up mentor is the most dangerous tool you could have as a comedian is giving yourself time to think. And I think that's so understated. People just want to rush and go into the next and the next thing rather than just being really smart with your choices. And then maturing as an artist too. Like taking the time out to find out who you are. I started very young too. I started 14 years old doing stand-up. It was never on television or anything like that, but I was really grinding at becoming really great at my craft and understanding it and a student of the craft and understanding the history of it. So that was, all that maturity helped me where I am today. Like when I got into making the series, it just made it so much easier for me to navigate through the production of it all, the writing of it all. Just I felt grounded. I felt like an adult in the situation, not like I was lost. Like, oh shit, what am I doing next? What's going on? You know, like.
But there's also a system in place. I mean, there's an entire sort of industry that is telling you to sort of keep going, keep doing, like strike while the iron is hot.
Yeah, I felt that. I felt like after I left Walking Dead, there was certainly like, here's the roadmap. But I think what was nice for me that I could have looked at negatively, but I ended up looking at it positively, was there was no real roadmap for someone like myself. So it actually created like a vacuum where I could do what I wanted to do if those situations were available to me. And I was very lucky that those were available to me. So I just kind of pivoted in ways that didn't feel like tread territory. Yeah.
John, this special, which obviously has been really, really sort of wildly well received. It has. It really has. I promise. Your comedy historically has been very much about sort of telling personal stories. Like this one felt sort of more confessional in a lot of ways. I guess my first question is, was it cathartic being out there performing that every night?
Was it cathartic?
You've described it as fun, which
I love. Fun.
Yeah.
And that was more the challenge I wanted to give myself was to, maybe be, in quotes, vulnerable. What I wanted to see is, could I say this much about myself but still own the room and be an entertainer? And that just seemed like more of a challenge as opposed to
totally
more somberly or groundedly presenting the facts of what this special's about.
So you sing a song at the top of the special.
I sing and dance. Yeah.
But you sing a song that hits on quickly sort of all the beats of what's sort of gone on in your life in the last couple of years. And then the last line of the song, which is likability is a jail. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means?
It's not so much, I don't think people set out to be likable. I think they put themselves out there in some way, and they, or speaking for myself, they enjoy the feedback that others relate to this, others stand this, others, I just want to get that word into the mix.
You got it, check.
And others have a lot of fun with this as well. And then it starts off, I must be on to something, I would think, or there's something about me these people get. I find that one the most dangerous. When they don't get you, then that's sort of phase two, and you go, oh, I like this is very remedial, but I like the positive. But why aren't they getting this part? Sometimes it can even be but why did they miss this aspect of this? Because that's the part I wanted them to see. Right. Not even, besides the fact that they've liked it, And then obviously, if people are disappointed in a direction you take, I wouldn't say that's hard, because it's very amusing at first, because it's so parental. Like, we're disappointed in you. It's just an odd feeling because I didn't know I was appointing you. Like, I didn't know we had that kind of relationship.
Sure.
The interesting thing I found doing the tour was I thought the idea of I'm also going to have boundaries. Like, I'm going to show more but have a boundary. Or I'm not going to people please as much in life is all great, and it's very liberating. But it is interesting to see that when you stop people pleasing, some people are not pleased. And it's not, that's fine. But it was a part of it that I went, oh, when you put up a boundary, sometimes you must be prepared, some people will not like it. Not everyone will just applaud it.
That's how you know it's working.
I guess so, yeah.
I had just watched this episode of Butkus, Pete Davidson's show, and again, you're sort of playing this version of yourself and being this sort of vulnerable or a version of
If you go through my work, most of my television is me playing myself on Friends shows.
You know what? It's a nice gig if you can get it.
Yeah.
But it seemed to me to sort of all fit into this like repackaging of you, this sort of repackaging of who the audience sort of thought you were. I mean, I think you described yourself in this. I wrote it down. The seemingly okay guy, all buttoned up, but inside having a fucking crisis all the time. If likability is jail, is how sort of conscious and freeing is showing this sort of other side.
We'll see.
We'll see. Okay.
Because am I still doing the same thing? Am I trying to communicate? Hey, there's a lot more going on with me. You all get it now? Am I still looking for that? Of course I am.
You're also always evolving as a human being.
Yeah.
It's just like outrageous to think you're going to be the same person throughout the years. You grow, you go through different experiences. There's family challenges, there's life challenges, and that translates into something else as the years go by. So this whole idea is that you're the same person from the beginning to the end. I don't want to, it's someone who I think about. When I think about this, I think about Will Smith. Mm-hmm. I think about this likability, this box that you're in the whole time, and it's not sustainable.
No.
And something's got to give at some point.
I think it goes back to the thing we were talking about before about taking time to think, like taking little pauses, because one of the things I think is true, especially in comedy, is that if something goes well, there's a system in place to encourage you to repeat that, right? And it becomes a facsimile of a facsimile and diminishing returns until it crashes into a wall. And then you turn around and everyone who was telling you to do more has jumped off the train already. You're just alone on the train.
Yourself on fire.
But the reason, I think generally, like the reason the first thing worked is because it was something honest. It was an honest reflection of where you were at the time.
Right.
And then it becomes increasingly less effective because it's no longer honest. So those little pauses are where you're supposed to reflect on, okay, where am I now? Forgetting Sarah Marshall was about a breakup because I was about as sophisticated as I was at 24 years old. Like, this is the biggest thing in the world to me. But then you see, like, if you're still making movies about being afraid of girls at 35, it's you see it. You know what that looks like. It's like, oh, it's not working anymore.
Right.
Yeah, no.
I don't know if you felt this with like your first stand-up special, but you basically have 0 to 25 to ruminate on things and sort of come up with a sensibility and figure out the jokes you like. So your first stand-up special is like the first 20 odd years of your life. And then your second one is 1 year. It's 1 year while you were mainly touring.
It's a really great point because for me, it was always, I'm constantly explaining myself. Wait, you're born in Kuwait, but you came to Texas when you were 9, but you're like, but you're Kuwaiti. You're Kuwaiti, but hold on, but are you Kuwaiti? Like, no, I'm not Kuwaiti. My parents are Palestinian. Oh, wait, what? How come you're not Kuwaiti? You're born there, you should get it. Oh, no, I don't get it. I was like, I'm fucking tired of answering these questions. The whole special the first one is gonna be all the questions that you have should be answered there. I just wanna be a comedian. That's what I am. And the idea of constantly being labeled as Arab American Muslim comedian is like the most obnoxious thing ever, and I feel like it's unfair completely. You're just a stand-up comedian that happens to be from this background.
Sure. This idea of likability. I mean, I feel like you, Jason, in your work, I feel like it happened on Shrinking, where you told the creators, like, you can push me to the limits. Like, I am, as a character, you'll still root for me. And I think you feel like you know where the line is. I mean, you went dangerously close at the very beginning of the show to that line. What is that?
Well, I think you can find out what's the worst that happens is you're wrong. You know, like that's one of the things that I've come to realize. It's okay to get it wrong. I used to be terrified of it. I used to be so terrified, like, what if they don't like it? And now I think, who cares? Like, make good shit, you know?
But a lot of people would be very precious about a character's likability, and it seems like something you were actually the opposite with.
Well, here's my experience in life. Okay, so I'm flawed. I'm a flawed human being. Who I have stuff that I've done that I'm not proud of, and I'm sure we all share those experiences. And I still have friends who know these things and love me. And, you know what I mean? I still have family members who love me. And so I think to myself, like, as long as when you're playing the character, you love them and you're playing them like somebody who is. Look, my acting idol when I was young was Kermit the Frog, you know? And then that gave way to like Tom Hanks and Jimmy Stewart. It's the same style of acting of like a surrogate. I am you know, on this journey. So like, put all your stuff onto me. There's another type of acting that's like aspirational, like they're way cooler than you, you know? Like, you like George Clooney, I don't watch him and think, that's me. I think that's who I aspire to be, you know? But so I think as long as I'm playing it like I'm all of us, and God, look at this fucking terrible thing I'm doing, people will be like, oh, I have done stuff like that.
And if you bail,
yes,
then you've left all of that in the lurch, right?
Yes.
Like now you have the opening for everybody to be like, oh, we're laughing at him? Okay, yeah, that's not me.
Yeah.
That was it with Danny, was like every day in this role, I was like, I gotta do that? Okay. And it was just every day, like, never bail on Danny. Like, these are all of our internal worst impulses, the most judgeable things that feel reprehensible, but these people are, this part of ourselves, these people, or this part of ourselves, are also deserving of love and respect, and you can give that to them. And if that, like you said, that is all of us. We're all flawed people.
I echo that 100%. And you don't know where the line is till you cross it, right? It's like anytime I was fearful about something in the show, like, oh, this is so deeply personal. A lot of it is grounded on my life, and it was so personal. It was scary. I would, like, there was one scene I literally broke down, and I thought, like, oh man, I didn't mourn this in my actual life. Whoops. Like, I'm walking on, everybody's like, well, hey, you know, can't even look you in the eye. It just, you know, makes me emotional just thinking about it. It was just like a really powerful thing when you're able to push yourself that way, and you feel so much better. And it is cathartic for me in that scenario.
Can I ask you what the scene was?
It was about my father being tortured. It's about dealing with that and suppressing that in the series. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was an incredibly powerful scene. Stephen, there obviously your character is dealing with such an intense amount of sort of anger and with that shame. I feel like I've heard you and Ali both talk about after the fact you just broke out in hives.
Like full on hives.
We're laughing about that now, but I suspect in real time it was not as funny. Like, did you recognize what was happening? It's still funny.
Surprisingly, I laughed. I laughed
did.
when it happened. I think that's the thing, you know, to echo Tyler's sentiment earlier about, like, I'm grateful that I came to a character like Danny now. Is just with an understanding of, like, it all connects what we're talking about. When I was first coming out doing this job, it's all about trying to get people to, like, you're just full throttle, like, am I doing a good job? And then settling into myself a little bit over the years and getting to play someone like Danny, I was so glad that I got him now, because I think even 5-6 years ago, I would have totally bailed on that dude.
You would?
I would have been like...
What would that have looked like?
That would have looked like me playing a caricature idea of Danny, in which my performance was like a slight wink to the audience that this is not me, right? But instead I'm like, I will be proxy for this character and this experience, because we don't throw that away. And that was, I think, the hives, because it's like, I'm also human and I also want to be liked, and every day was walking into set being like, Danny is so fucked up. He is doing some gnarly things, but can I find a way in to not justify whether those are good or okay, but like feel the feeling of why someone would feel the way to, the reason to do something like this. And that was an interesting exercise. And I think touching all of that, I was just holding a lot. And when I left, I was like, I let it go. And it didn't feel like I was letting Danny go. It actually felt like I was absorbing Danny and letting the shame of Danny go.
Oh, interesting.
And I think the shame was the hives.
Sorry, it's just.
You're still laughing about hives. I love it.
I'm a comedian, bro. Like, you're gonna have to laugh.
It was hilarious. It was all over my body. I was like, what the fuck is happening?
I thought that show was so profound because, if you don't mind me complimenting.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, because it's like they set up two characters who are seemingly opposites, and then by the end of the show say they're the same.
Yeah.
And so if they're the same, then all of us are in that
That's
circle.
the
Yes.
thing. It's the
Right?
commonality.
Yes.
That's what,
Yes.
as scary as that can be, not being likable. If you can find the commonality within yourself, then I think the audience will as well. That's what, like, I remember having that quite a bit, of being really scared from role to role, of like, because at times you can get stuck in things and people assume that's what you are. But whenever you make the choice to find the things about yourself that you don't even necessarily know how to process or like about yourself, and then connect that to where that character is, more than likely the audience is doing the same thing. And if we do what we're doing properly, you should feel that at the end of the day. Because that shame is still there.
Yeah.
It's not that it's not there. It has to process its way out in some way, shape, or form.
And it's so, as an actor too, it's fun. It's not fun. It's fun, actually. It's fun, but it's also like really nice when you're aware that you can use that feeling in the moment. I remember they put me up that tree to fall down. And while I was up there, I was like, "You motherfuckers put me up this tree!" And like I actually didn't know I was gonna go that high. And when I got that high, I was actually like really angry because I was just like, "Why would you put me in this situation that looks so pathetic?" And then I flipped it. I was like, "Okay, this is what I'm supposed to feel." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Let's just lean into that and like just go full pathetic." And the scene turned out great because he was supposed to be feeling that, and so that was the exercise continually of playing Danny. Was why am I feeling this way? Because the situation is what it is. Yeah.
I remember having that with you when we did like my last scene of The Walking Dead. I remember that day not wanting to leave that show. And feeling shame for feeling that. Because like as an actor, you go from like project to project and it's just kind of part of the world. So you should be used to just like working with people, detaching and all of that. And it was a struggle that day. But then that became the thing. Because there was like, after we shot it, they called cut. I like broke down for
You collapsed, right?
Yeah, it was a whole thing and he was a really good guy about it.
Dude, the whole scene was you saying, "Don't let me go."
And that was it was like, you're in this moment and everything that you've been feeling all day, you didn't realize that was the point.
Yeah.
The point was to get you right there to
Yeah.
that time and not judge it and just kind of let it be what it is.
Yeah.
But it's crazy, same thing. Didn't realize that until we were in the door.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Why do you think that one felt different?
I think because of the connections. I think that show particularly, for me, didn't feel like a transient show. It felt like something where I made real connections with real people.
That was a family show.
It was a real family show. So that's, even now, somebody came up to me recently and said that they had run into, I think it was Andra Day.
Oh, nice.
And she had brought up that she was lovely and all that, and I had this like 1,000-yard stare, and I was like, "We've been through some shit."
Yeah, man.
She was like, "What does that mean?" It's all good. Don't worry about it. But when you have that, and then you call cut, and then you leave, it doesn't just go away.
No.
You know what I mean? It's still a thing that lives in you, and you feel connected to people still. So that's what was difficult, I think, in leaving that and letting that one go. But right after, I went to a period of silence, which helps.
Looking back at your careers, what felt at the time like the biggest risk?
I did a movie when after How I Met Your Mother ended. I didn't know what I wanted to do next, and I knew in my head I really wondered if I could do a drama, but I didn't know if I was actually good enough. I thought I was, but I didn't know. So I took a movie called The End of the Tour to play David Foster Wallace, and when I finally like was gonna do it, I was so scared because I thought, oh, the degree of difficulty of this not looking like a Saturday Night Live sketch. When you get the glasses on and the bandana and like you're saying the lines, I'm like, oh, it could be so embarrassing. And I also had no system of prep because you kind of prep differently for comedy, especially there was a lot of improv and how we came up. So these were big chunks of dialogue. And I literally just played in my head, what would Edward Norton do? And I like got a dialect coach and I did all these things that I like read about or heard about that you do if you're a real actor. But I was scared.
But you know what's difficult about the whole experience leading up to like the first action is everybody's talking about characters and story in judgment. That's the way that the whole thing processes itself, which is like, this is a story about this character is this person, he's like this, and that's why he's this way, which is, you're talking about somebody. And the whole, you have to be that person. And so that's always been the struggle, is like leading up to a role, first action is like, how do I slip out of judgment of this character? How do I let this person be me? Because I've just been talking kind of shit about him the whole time. That's the hardest part to me.
I think the whole thing is a risk. The whole entire thing is a risk. I mean, in stand-up, there's no road, right? You build your own road as you go, and you don't know where it's gonna end up. And is this gut feeling right that I felt when I was 10? Is this thing what I'm supposed to be doing? And the whole thing is a risk. The entire
there's an immediate
path is that way.
response when you're standing up on stage,
Sure.
which is different.
Not talking about actually art form itself, it's the actual career path.
Sure.
It's all a risk. Every fucking step of the way is a risk.
Yeah, that's fair.
This business particularly, like it is that way.
John, you at one point did sort of what Mo is doing now, which is do a show with your name in it.
Yeah.
And went from
Let's see a clip.
And roll.
Short clip.
Well, you went from being a pretty anonymous in the sense that you were
Very anonymous.
Very anonymous.
No, really, and I perhaps
Underestimated that?
underestimated that those that knew me might really not come along for this, and that those that knew me were the tiniest of sliver of the audience, and that most people were, it wasn't that I thought more people knew who I was. I think I thought that I was bringing a sensibility that was, I don't know, more widely appreciated. And then I was also trying to turn that on its head by doing a multicam, which had all these sort of hokey or sometimes hacky, but look, we can really make this form weird and interesting again. It was a lot of challenges. I really suffered from high self-esteem at that time. The idea that I thought, that no one knows who I am, so I'll do a kind of role reversal. I'll do what you don't expect me to do when no one already knows who I am.
The initial idea was different, right? When it was it ultimately aired on Fox, and it was one show, but I think there was another version of the show.
There was another version
been,
at NBC,
which was about
called Mulaney Don't Drink, which was about
would have been helpful.
Me getting sober at 23, or it was based on the time in my life when I got sober at 23, and had 2 roommates and was trying to be literally like sort of just figuring out like, what does a good person do? And this was like a part that was like an actual part of my life, right? Or a pointless gauntlet I threw down in front of myself. And that was the NBC show, and there was really something lost when I, on the advice of others higher up, took that out, But I also I take full responsibility. I lost this thread that made it something.
But how are you supposed to know?
No way.
At 23 years old. I have so many things in my career where I'm like, oh God, I should have done it. And it's like, how the fuck am I supposed to know about any of this?
And Saturday Night Live is about, people talk about how high stakes it is and stressful it is. It's also the most protected environment in entertainment. Like, we don't get notes. I mean, we get notes from Lorne or, feedback from the cast, but I saw Jeff Zucker maybe once when he was the president of NBC. Nothing reached us. And so to suddenly be the writer and producer and star of a network pilot, let alone series, it was like suddenly being the captain of a cruise ship. I was like, I have to worry about personnel, menu binders, meals for people, hours, how late everyone's. It was such a different thing.
Would you ever consider doing a different version in today's climate where you can do it on a streamer or a network?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
You know, I've enjoyed doing it through stand-up.
Yeah.
One thing I learned doing it was that I wasn't sure what my story was. You know, what exactly am I bringing to everyone and why?
Yep.
And do they need it?
Well,
This whole idea of like, I wish, what if, and if I did this is all like really dangerous terminology. You should not. People should like never do that. You should like learn from it. It's very dangerous for your psyche.
I'll stop.
It can be really, really. Don't do it. Don't do it, John.
Good.
No, I really believe that. It's just like, hey, learn, keep it moving, look forward. It's very, very important because it can be really damaging to your health. Like, it's not
right.
good.
Mo, you've said of your career, nothing happened overnight. There's so much out there where they make you do things that you aren't necessarily okay with. It took over 20 years of patience and understanding to truly figure out the business and what story I wanted to tell. What had been the feedback and how did you sort of digest it at the time? And when did that feeling start to change?
Well, it started, again, from my mentor. I had a great mentor, Danny Martinez, in the Comedy Showcase in Houston for like 30 years. And I walked into this club when I was 17, and he said I had all the tools. I'm very excited. He mentored Ralphie May, went on to be very successful. T-Shawn Shannon, who wrote for SNL for like 10 years. A lot of guys went on to be successful. He said, hey, you're gonna be successful if you do this, and that, but FYI, it's gonna take you 20 years to get there. And I was like, I'm in. Immediately, I was in.
That didn't scare you?
No, not at all. It made me actually settled. I was like, oh, okay. I have something to work toward. I have a drive to work towards it. And now it's like, okay, there's stages to it. You go on the road, you're on your wings, and you grow up, you start learning, you're growing, pain, lots of pain, so much pain, which is good for you too. Like to get through, it's really impactful. And it's, again, I've been explaining myself so long, and in the business early on, it was just like, hey, you're really talented if you could just change your name. That's how it started for me in the early 2000s, like post 9/11. It was a little kid just thinking my career's over, and just very upsetting if you have, that's what people are telling you.
Of course.
And it was one of those things that it was a big challenge for me, but I was very excited to hit this. I was just so focused on being myself and understanding like, hey, it's gonna take a moment for people to accept who you are, to understand who you are. And when the moment's right, I'll be prepared.
I love that.
Could I say one? I was thinking
Absolutely.
about learning from things. And when you asked me, would you do it again in today's climate? My immediate thought was like, oh, should I? And I realized I want to be clear, I have no idea what I'm doing. And any of the naivete I talked about from the sitcom days, I mean, just had a special come out. I'm off tour at the moment. And every day I'm as open to everything, naive about everything, and confused about everything.
Yeah.
Tyler, you recently said, I'm gonna phase my career where I'm doing things for me now, which obviously, one loves hearing, but it also made me curious, sort of, when was that not the case, and when and why did it shift?
I think for a while I was doing things just to survive. I think one of the hard parts of finding success young is then you're immediately thrown into the do you have staying power argument.
Yeah.
And I was just, I was trying to keep the train rolling, just not stopping, which I think, eventually everyone figures out is just not sustainable. After taking those like periods of silence, I was able to figure out what I actually wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. I didn't, really play in the comedy world for a while for that reason, because I wasn't sure how I wanted to do that. As the climate in comedy was kind of shifting around, let's say like 2010s-ish, I didn't see where my place was for it. And I think also like a big part of it is, do I even want to do the thing that I think I want to do? I think I went through that period of time for like 10 years of like, am I just chasing this just because I feel like this is where I'm supposed to go, or because I'm trying to prove somebody wrong, or am I trying to prove myself right? And once I got to proving myself right, that's when I started doing things for me that I just wanted to do. I think everyone at this table has to sit and grapple with like, is this going to be well received at some point? But if you don't get to the fuck it, I do what I want, eventually you burn out.
When do you feel like you guys got to that moment, the fuck it, I'll do what I want in your careers? Assuming that we're there. Maybe we're not there.
Well, I can't answer it directly, but I can tell you that stand-up is really empowering, where you're not dependent on a thing, you're dependent on yourself and your writing and ability to go out on the road and earn a living.
Yep.
And still doing something that you really love. I just found it really difficult to wait for the thing to come to me. You know?
Sure. What about you, Stephen? Was that a moment that you can identify?
Which, by the way, you're like, he is inspiration for my fuck it, I do what I want. Every time I think about something and I'm like, I feel like I should do this, and like I have even people on teams saying you should go this way, I think about Steven and I'm like, yeah, Steven would just say like, nah, I'm gonna wait. Because like
that's the move though.
I've admired that about your career since leaving The Walking Dead. Is there's this feeling of like I feel as if when you choose something or I see you do something, it's because you're truly inspired by it and want to do it.
Thanks, man. I think that's partly true. I think where I can't take most of that credit is, again, like I was saying earlier, like there's no roadmap for someone like myself, at least for me before. And so it was very easy no's. It was like, do you want to do the thing that everybody's seen you do, bro. Or do you want to do something else? And then
would you like
there
to
was
play
a
Terrace
script.
number 7?
Yeah, right. And then a script would appear to say like, hey, here's a shot at not doing that. Right. Yeah. And so there was a part of fuck it, I'll do what I want, but there was also part of it that was like, I'll show you. Mm-hmm. And so I was still bound to the expectations of others. Yeah. And I still am. I in my humanity, I still am. I wish I was a total fuck it, I'll do what I want. But for me, I've just been very fortunate that for every obvious door, there was like a tiny hidden one that I was like, oh, I'll do that one right now. And I think I'm approaching, I don't know if I'll ever approach it, but I feel like these days I'm a little bit more aware to ask myself those questions, which is like, am I doing this for like truly my own personal, like unaware expression? Or is this like some sort of like, is there some reason behind this? And you have to dig, you have to keep digging. And sometimes you like creep up to a project and you're like, and then all the reasons why you're saying yes to it feel fraudulent. And then you back off. I'm still there. Yeah.
Jason, do you feel like you're there?
Well, I mean, this discussion is all I really think about. I think that there was a period in my life and career around like the last couple years of How I Met Your Mother where things were firing on both movies and TV, and everyone was telling me how well it was going. I was really unhappy. And so I then had to grapple with like, why? What's off about this equation? Because I should be feeling like I did it.
Yeah, you made it. I mean, what could be bigger in theory?
Yeah, and something was off. And so it goes back to a lot of the discussions we were having about making sure that what you're doing is some sort of act of self-exploration. Like there's a reason you're doing it, you know? But I think the thing that I was confronted with, which is like, it's really great to make the decision of like, fuck it, I do what I want. But unfortunately, it's a system of permission in place where then people are like, we don't give a shit. Great, good for you. Good for you, man. And so, and so then for me, it was and has been, and I probably will continue to be, what I like is not obvious, unfortunately or fortunately, you know, like I had to fight hard to put a Dracula puppet musical at the end of a movie, you know, it's like all the ideas are people often being like, no, that's stupid. And so it's a battle of like summoning the will to say like, okay, shit, I have an idea and I believe in it and it won't leave me alone. And now I'm going to do the 3 years or 4 years of like fighting through all the permissions and pushing the boulder up the hill. And then sometimes you get the boulder right to the top of the hill and they still say no. And 3 years are gone. It's, it's tricky. I think a big thing, like maybe part of the big equation is getting to the point where you ask yourself, what is worth trading my time for?
Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly. Yeah. Like what am I going to give over 9 months or 2 years or 3 years for, and is it worth it?
Yeah.
Because I look back at the ones I didn't like and I was like, that was not worth worth age 28.
Yes. Right.
Damn it. Well played, Hollywood. Well played.
One of the other things you've talked about with Abbott is that it's been really important for you to try and make things better for the younger actors, the children on the show. I'm going to quote you again, Abbott in general has been therapeutic for me. I needed to know that I could influence it being done differently. Which begs the question, sort of, what do you wish had been done differently?
I think generally because of everything that kind of we've talked about today, there's so many different things that I guess people in all aspects of the creative process are going through. And I think a lot of times that can come out not just in the work, but then also in the work environment because the stakes are so high. And, a lot of times people who end up catching the brunt of those things are those who don't have voices. And if they're kids, it's kids. They can feel that energy, they're sensitive to it. I was always kind of curious if it had to be that way.
What do you wish someone had pulled you aside and said? What would have been helpful to hear at that age?
Nobody knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's not just you.
No matter how old you
are. It's not just you.
Yeah, sure.
Everyone's scared and no one knows what's happening and no one knows if this is gonna work. And that's what's nice about it is because kids exist in that space constantly.
Yeah.
It actually is reassuring to know that the adults around you are doing the same thing and feel the same way. So I think as the world has evolved, I think we've gotten more comfortable with saying that. And less, feeling like we need to put up this illusion that we kind of have it all together. And I think that's healthy.
Yeah.
Especially for them so that they don't feel as if they're walking into an atmosphere that's, you only have one way to be.
You sometimes meet those older people in your life that know it, they know it all. And I don't trust those people when they're like, I know, they're comfortable in their knowing, because that means you're oppressing someone in your comfort. If you're comfortable, someone's uncomfortable.
That's usually the case.
Right.
But if they're comfortable in a faith in the process, that's a different feeling. Where you're like, oh, you're just faithful to, you've been around the block enough times to, Scott Wilson, the late Scott Wilson was that to me, where I was just watching him and he was just like, I'll know when. Right. He's like, I'm gonna hold, I remember he did this great thing where this episode was his to carry where he's saving everybody. And then at the end, he has his final breakdown. And I just watched him hold it. And he didn't even go this is the spot where I cry. He was just holding it. And then he was like, I think this is when. And then he gave it right there and it was so powerful. And watching someone have faith in that process, as opposed to, usually around page 64 is when you and then you're you don't know anything. You clearly don't know anything.
That's the biggest piece, I think, in growing up within the industry is you assume that everything in Hollywood works because somebody knows what they're doing. And it's usually the opposite.
What a rush it is, though, to pretend that you know what you're doing. When you're in charge of something and you go, yes, the red one. And I have no idea what I'm saying.
One of the other things, Tyler, you had talked about was describing this idea of fame coming early and the sort of how equipped you were to navigate the sort of those aspects of success.
I was 100% unequipped.
You were unequipped.
I don't think at that period of time you have enough life experience to be able to do that. But then also it was at the time when the internet was becoming a part of the industry in a way, actively, where people were finding a time to be able to have discourse about what they were watching in real time. So I don't know if at that period of time anyone was ready for where we were headed to.
How about the rest of you? How do you guys feel? Were you equipped for the sort of fame that came? That looks like a no.
No, my Freaks and Geeks and all that stuff was before the iPhone, and I think that I just feel like it all changed with the iPhone when all of a sudden it became moment to moment and all that. And but I don't really know any different all that much. I was 18 or 19 years old, so my adult life I've been doing it. I like people a lot. You end up talking to people a lot.
Yeah, that's great.
I like honestly to be able to eat at restaurants that are hard to get into.
Yep.
And then besides that, it's kind of weird, but it's all I know. And
Yeah.
It's like, you remember on Seinfeld when people would yell, "Hey, Kramer," as he walked down the street?
It's such a good way to put it, man.
And he'd go, "Yeah," there's something about that that's, I mean, it's, who knows how, it's probably terribly unhealthy, but it's there's a fun to it.
Yes.
There's some kind of warmth. I don't mean to over-sentimentalize it, but there's something
Totally
interesting.
agree.
Yeah.
Okay, there's one thing that I was just reading a story on Janelle James, your co-star, and she was telling a story about when Abbott got picked up for a second season. She had to move to LA permanently, which meant she also had to buy a car. She said she had planned to buy a top-of-the-line Mazda. I love that you're laughing. You know where this is going.
Yeah, I know.
Until you chimed in. And these are her words. Tyler said, "No, bitch, you cannot pull up to season 2 in a Mazda." So I'm going to stop right there. Like, so far, is this story tracking?
Yeah,
okay.
it definitely tracks.
And
It definitely tracks.
then you took her to some dealerships, and she ended up with the BMW.
Yeah, they she got the BMW. Yeah.
I felt like BMW.
Yeah, that felt like that was where that
That's
story was
she
going.
landed, yeah.
I would have taken a Mercedes. It's fine.
Who had a similar conversation with you earlier in your career, or at what points did someone pull you aside and tell you, like, you can treat yourself, like you can have a little fun?
That's why I think we had that conversation. It didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
I think for me with Janelle specifically, because the minute we saw the show and the pilot, it was like, you're going to be a huge thing, like kind of everywhere. But you spend so much of your career in this place of like scared that the bottom will just kind of fall out. And it felt like there was a nice opportunity to kind of let her know, like, no, I think this one's stable. I think this, based on my history and what I've seen and all that, this is stable enough that you don't have to spend the majority of the ride scared. That was the thing that I was trying to get her to as fast as possible, because you can spend 4 years of a 6-year show scared it's going to get canceled. You know what I mean? And never really actually enjoy it. So I was hoping that we could kind of like fast track that and get to it. And she
She at
actually
least
did.
get the demo model where she saved
Yes.
a little bit on the
Yes,
depreciation?
yes,
Okay,
yes,
good, all right,
yes,
good.
yes.
Did you each have those moments? I mean, whether it was a splurge that someone sort of inspired for you, or whatever it looked like?
I think I did that. I was scared that the bottom was going to drop off for a while. Yeah.
I still am.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even joking. No, honestly, I'm still quite scared of that.
Same, yeah. Exactly, I agree.
I mean, you work so hard. It's good to spoil yourself sometimes, you know. And it doesn't happen in high frequency, but you work so damn hard. Like, what's the point? Like, be comfortable.
And if you don't dismantle the fear early, it can kind of get out of control. And everyone has different ways of testing the boundaries of that, of like, you know, whether it's buying something or choosing to live a certain way or having these little moments where you get comfortable rather than constantly sitting on the razor's edge.
How I process things is I jumped out of I skydived one time, and that is like the perfect analogy of how I approach most things, which is agonize about it for like 2 days. Like, think about whether I should like make videos to my loved ones and I'm not gonna see them anymore. And just like, you know what I mean? Like an hour before you're like, I guess I gotta be all right with dying.
So
And then
funny.
you get to the edge and you're like, fuck it, I'll jump. And then you jump.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I wish I could not agonize, but
But that's your process.
yeah, that is process, right?
Are you worried that the final product won't be as good if you don't agonize?
Ooh, I think that is part of my process. Yeah, I don't necessarily worry. It's just so ingrained in part of my process that I have to like like ones and zeros everything until you just throw it all away. But I do need to ones and zeros everything.
I feel like you have to make a great, something really great. There's got to be some pain, some kind of worry. If you're just too comfortable the whole time, I think it's gonna stink. I mean, personally, it just can't be that good.
Well, I guess it's degrees of worry.
Yeah, sure.
Degrees of worry. I certainly was someone who thought like you have to really be uncomfortable throughout the whole process and really be tired and really be sort of bone weary, and then you'll get this jewel, you know. And it just was trial and error. I saw, well, I did that, it didn't work.
Right.
So I'm going to try. The second time I hosted Saturday Night Live, I thought, I agonized over the whole week, and then we had a good show, but it was so uncomfortable. And I wanted to enjoy it so much more that this time I am okay having a bad show if I just have fun, relax, enjoy all the people I get to see again and work with.
Yeah.
And then the show went well. So I don't know.
No, absolutely right. No, there is. This is a
That's
big
enough
point.
of an experiment. Take
The
those
degrees
results.
of it, yeah. Obsession is good, but like only to a certain degree.
Sure.
Compulsion is what's bad. Like, you know.
John I didn't even think about that in the way of, if you have the experience where you obsess over it and then it doesn't go well, what did you it can be freeing, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Because most of my experiences were obsessing over it and it went well, so I assume that was part of the process.
That was it.
It's like, okay, so in order for it to go well, it has to do that. But there's something that had to have been freeing, I'm assuming, with obsessing, and it still didn't necessarily go the way you wanted it to.
It didn't go the way I wanted it to. It didn't go. In no way did it go the way I wanted it.
So as we come to the end, what have you all not done that you'd still love to do? Are there things that are still sort of on the professional bucket list, if you will? If an agent is calling you tomorrow, what do you hope they're calling you with?
I'd like to play a villain.
Yeah.
I feel as though a part of my self-awareness is that I walk the line between charming and creepy.
Yeah.
And I often fall on charming, but I'd like to tip the other way.
You want to go to creepy?
Yeah, I'd like to be creepy.
I don't know. I felt like in the immediate, Danny was a hard left turn for me in a really fun way, and I loved it. So there are other things, but
your next step, I mean, what you're doing next is a giant Marvel movie.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it kind of came together in a weird way. Jake Schreier, who did episodes of Beef, he got the gig to direct it, and then he kind of saw me for this role. And I read the role and I was like, this is actually a really interesting role. I'd be down to explore this. I think it's less about now checking things off a bucket list and more looking at an experience. It's more like, do I want to experience that? Yeah. Putting it out is a whole nother thing that I'm gonna have to prepare for afterwards. But in the immediate, I'm just down to experience that experience.
I mean, doing Black Adam, which is, you know, big DC film with The Rock, like showing up to those sets is just so daunting. Like, wow, you guys built a whole fucking city? Like, it's a whole entire city. And you're gonna trash it? It was so much fun. And I really enjoy playing a character that's completely different. And I think that's the track that I'd like to continue on. Just continue to challenge myself, and it's about that experience. Stand up, that'll never change. Like that's my first love, that's my baby, that's the constant. SNL, clearly like a big bucket list thing for me that I just would love to do.
I feel like a lot of the things that I've done have been likable. I would like to explore the unlikable a bit more. But I've always said, like, every time I get asked, what's the ideal thing you want to do? All my favorite things I've ever done came about because I wasn't thinking about that thing. I always feel like the next big thing I want to do, someone somewhere is thinking about, so I don't have to worry about that. It's like, that's what happened with Abbott in the middle of the pandemic. I was like, I think I was at home just high, eating chips. And then here it just pops up and I was like, I wasn't even thinking about this and this is great. So I'm just really having fun right now with what comes.
I'd love to write, before I die, it's a good way to end. I would like to write one film as good as Searching for Bobby Fischer, or any of those films that I saw as a kid that really packed a punch and just really got life kind of right. If I could do that once, I'd be very happy.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
It makes it all a worthy trek, right?
Yeah.
It really does.
Something that gets life as it is. Yeah.
And then cast all these guys. Perfect.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Chess masters, all of us.
Thank you guys so much for being here and
you.
for the conversation.
It was fun.
Absolutely.
So we should meet again at the same time next week? It feels really therapeutic.
DMC building.